Right now on Morning News Now, pilgrimage and prayers for Pope Francis. This morning, thousands of worshipers filing into St. Peter's Basilica for one more day before Pope Francis is laid to rest. We'll take you to the Vatican as the final funeral preparations are made. Also this morning, foreign fallout. President Trump contradicting China and insisting trade talks are underway. Meanwhile, the president condemning Russia for its latest round of attacks on Ukraine. And here at home, new signs that one of the youngest generations is growing less satisfied with the state of the country. Are you proud to be an American?
I think that's a complicated answer. I am not proud of what the country is doing right now or the direction we're going.
I'll share the results from an eye-opening new NBC News poll. Plus, more Americans going for gold when it comes to investing instead of the typical stocks and bonds. How the uncertain economy is inspiring a modern-age gold rush. And give it a rest. Millions of people turning to TikTok to try out new trends for getting better sleep. We'll break down some expert advice on sleep hacks, what works, what doesn't, and what you might want to do instead. We are all ears.
Exactly. We will take whatever advice comes your way, especially if you wake up early in the morning. Good to have you with us on this Friday. I'm Joe Fryer.
Yeah, so happy it's Friday. I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks for joining us. We're going to start this morning at the Vatican, where mourners are saying their final goodbyes to Pope Francis ahead of his funeral. Tens of thousands of worshipers from across the globe have come to the Vatican this week, waiting in line for hours to pay their respects. Today is the third and final day that his body lies in state in St. Peter's Basilica.
American Cardinal Kevin Farrell will preside over a ceremony later today to seal the Pope's coffin. That will mark the end of public viewing. World leaders are set to attend Pope Francis's funeral tomorrow. That includes President Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky. NBC News international correspondent Claudio Lavanga joins us now. He's at the Vatican with the latest. Claudio, good morning. It has been so moving to see just how many people are showing up to pay their respects as the Pope lies in state. Talk about what the atmosphere is like there. And do we know how many mourners have visited St. Peter so far?
Joe, Savannah, good morning. Well, absolutely. I was just down there in St. Peter's Square half an hour ago, and there is a very long line of people waiting for their opportunity to get inside St. Peter's Basilica to bid farewell to Pope Francis. As you mentioned, today is the last day, but also today is a national holiday here. It is Liberation Day from Nazi fascism, so the people have their day off. So probably a lot of people waited for today for their opportunity to pay their respects. Now, this morning, as of this morning, the Vatican said that so far, since Wednesday morning, 128,000 people have bid farewell here to Pope Francis, but I do expect the number to go up significantly throughout the day, especially because people are coming here to make sure they do that before St. Peter's Basilica closes in about 7 hours from now, ahead of that ritual of the closing of the coffin and ahead of tomorrow's funeral, of course. Joe?
Claudio, let's talk about the funeral preparations are underway. We mentioned that an American cardinal, his name's Kevin Farrell, will be presiding over a ceremony later today that's to seal the Pope's coffin. Tell us about what happens next and then what we know about the upcoming service.
Well, Savannah, later today at 8 o'clock, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, a number of cardinals will preside over the ritual of the closing of the coffin. As you mentioned, the American Cardinal Kevin Farrell, who's the Chamberlain of the Catholic Church, will preside that. But also we noticed that among the very short list of cardinals who will have the privilege to be there is also Roger Mahony, the former Archbishop of Los Angeles, who in 2013 was accused of mishandling cases of sexual abuse by priests while he was in charge. Now, Mahony has apologized for that, but still he was allowed to carry out his public ministry as cardinal, and as such, he also took part in the 2013 conclave that elected Pope Francis, even though there were many calls for him to recuse himself. Now, we asked the Vatican, and the Vatican said that he's in there. He's among the very restricted number of cardinals who take part in this privileged closing of the coffin tonight, because he's the most senior cardinal priest. So unless Cardinal Mahony recuses himself from tonight, he will be part of it, and it will be, you can say, controversial, because obviously he will take part of the closing of a coffin for Pope Francis, who's been fighting throughout his pontificate exactly against behavior like that. Savannah, Joe?
Claudio, the Vatican released a computer-generated image of what Pope Francis's tomb might look like. It's currently being prepared in the Basilica of St. Mary Major. Tell us about this tomb and just how it reflects his time as Pope.
Hey, Joe, it looks like a very simple tombstone. It's a very small tombstone made of marble that comes from the northern Italian region of Liguria. That is where the Pope's grandparents migrated from to Argentina. So it's kind of back to his roots for the Pope. And also there is a simple inscription of it that says Franciscus, and that, of course, reflects the humble nature of Pope Francis. And these are all things that the Pope Francis has said that he wanted his tomb to look like in his final testament that the Vatican released just a few days ago. Joe, Savannah?
Claudia, we know that the Vatican does keep things pretty confidential, though we're getting some good information about certain things. But what about conclave? Anything disclosed publicly yet, quickly?
Well, we don't have any information yet as of when it will start. We know that the conclave should start 15 to 20 days after the Pope's death. Now, they haven't announced the date yet, and probably they'll wait after the funeral. You have to take into consideration also that all this, they need to wait for all the cardinals to gather here to Rome. Not everyone is here. And also these are cardinals that come from all over the world, and some of them have never really met each other. So they need time first to get to know each other, and then probably we'll hear about a date next. But tomorrow, in the meantime, we're going to have a funeral where at least 130 international delegations, the Vatican said, including 50 heads of state, including Donald Trump, of course, will be here in Rome. And I'll show you what some of the Roman newspapers say. Il mondo a Roma. It says the world in Rome. And that's exactly what tomorrow is going to happen here behind me in St. Peter's Square, guys.
All right, Claudio, thank you so much. And you can tune in to NBC News now at 4 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. We will have live coverage of Pope Francis's funeral.
President Trump and the First Lady, they are heading to Rome later today to attend that funeral. But the trip comes amid ongoing uncertainty surrounding this trade war with China. Yesterday, the president doubled down on his assertion that his administration was talking to China, despite Beijing earlier insisting that no talks were taking place.
Well, they had a meeting this morning, so I can't tell you. It doesn't matter who they is. We may reveal it later, but they had meetings this morning, and we've been meeting with China.
NBC News White House correspondent Von Hilliard joins us on this now. Von, great to see you. So this back and forth over this trade dispute with China continues after the Trump administration had signaled this softer stance earlier this week. Where do things stand right now, not just with China, but with efforts overall to strike trade deals with other countries?
Right, Savannah. Let's just start with the baseline, that these negotiations would be intense. Essentially, you have an embargo between the United States and China right now with 145% tariff on Chinese goods coming to the U.S., 125% tariff on U.S. goods going to China. That is just an insane amount of money that would be required to bring products into either country. And now this gets to where are these negotiations? Well, the two sides can't even agree, Savannah, on whether they are talking or not. And I say that because over the last 48 hours, as you noted, there's been great back and forth. And literally just this morning, China has put out a statement saying China and the U.S. are not, in all caps, having any consultation or negotiation on hashtag tariffs. The U.S. should stop creating confusion. Well, just a few minutes ago, Time magazine published an interview with President Trump, who says that he has had a direct conversation with President Xi, who called him. And so I think you could say we're in the early stages of negotiations, if negotiations are taking place at all. As for other countries, the U.S. continues to facilitate conversations with Vietnam and with Japan. Yet at the same time, there has not been an apparent deal struck, despite in that same Time magazine interview, the president contending that he has already come up with 200 deals. He did not provide a single example of one of those deals, though, Savannah.
Obviously, so much to keep following here, and so many Americans are concerned just about the price of goods, empty shelves, that kind of thing. We know you'll stay on it for us, Vaughn. I do want to ask you about something else here. We just learned yesterday that the Trump administration is urging the Supreme Court to allow it to enforce a ban on transgender service members in the military. What can you tell us here?
Right. It was a federal judge out west that placed an injunction finding on the ban of transgender individuals from serving in the military. And effectively, the appeals court in this case sided with that federal district judge. And now the Trump administration is taking this to the Supreme Court to allow their ban to move forward. That federal district judge in the state of Washington found that the administration failed to provide evidence, the judge said, of why it was necessary to ban transgender individuals. At the same time, the Solicitor General for the Trump administration is planning to argue in front of the Supreme Court that deference should be given to military leaders in terms of judgment of what best policies should be implemented to effectively use the U.S. military in the most effective manner. We could expect the Supreme Court to potentially take up this case. This would be a big battle here between the two sides.
Absolutely. Von Hilliard covering a lot for us. Thank you so much.
President Trump is now lashing out at Russia just a day after accusing Ukraine's president of derailing peace talks. Mr. Trump criticized President Putin yesterday after Russia unleashed its deadliest attack on Ukraine in months. In a post, Mr. Trump addressed the Russian leader by his first name, urging him to stop, calling the attack, quote, not necessary and very bad timing. At least 12 people were killed Thursday when Russia launched 70 missiles and 140 drones at Kyiv. It happened just hours after President Trump had said a deal to end the war was very close. NBC News reporter Matt Bodner joins us now from London with the latest. So, Matt, President Trump says he believes both sides are going to reach an agreement, but it doesn't look that way. I mean, are these U.S. negotiations making any progress?
Well, Joe, as you said, it certainly doesn't look like it, at least as things stand now. So earlier this week, we saw talks set to take place here in London collapse at essentially the last minute. That was followed by yet another round of President Trump taking shots at President Zelensky, characterizing him as the problem after the Ukrainian president reiterated that he will not accept the recognition of Crimea. Now, Trump appears to be directing his ire at this point at Russian President Vladimir Putin following those strikes on Kyiv, and he's saying it's time to make a deal. And that is essentially the White House message now. They don't seem all that concerned with the details. They just want to say they've made a deal to end the fighting. And Trump himself seems to be optimistic he can still achieve that. Take a listen to this.
I have my own deadline. And we want it to be fast. And after that, we're going to have a very much different attitude. But I think it has a very good chance of getting done.
Now, given that there are a lot of questions about various contested and occupied territories as part of these talks, it's very hard to see how any meaningful agreement can be achieved on Trump's deadline.
Yeah, and President Zelensky has implied he just doesn't think the U.S. is putting enough pressure on Russia. So we know U.S. officials do plan to go to Moscow this week, speak directly with President Putin. What's expected to come from those talks?
So the Kremlin has been very vague about these talks, but we do understand Steve Witkoff's plane has arrived in Moscow, and he's meeting with President Putin today. There has been some suggestion that Putin is willing to give up claims on Ukrainian territory that he doesn't actually physically control at this time. But the Kremlin can be pursuing that tack, if they really are, to appear to be making concessions that convince Trump to recognize their claim on Crimea. And based on how things have gone so far, there is every chance that Putin can sell Witkoff on this. That said, given the rhetorical developments on Trump's end over the past 24 hours, Witkoff may actually be pushing for a meaningful ceasefire today.
Let's talk more about Crimea. Obviously, a major sticking point for both sides. We know what Zelensky thinks. We know what Trump thinks. Just what do everyday Ukrainians think about this issue?
Well, this is a great and important question, Joe. I was actually speaking last night to a woman named Lena, and she is a Crimean Tatar living in Kyiv, and that is a community that has been largely displaced by the Russian occupation of the peninsula. And I was asking her, what do Ukrainians think of Trump's proposal? She asked that we don't share her last name. She still has family living in Crimea. But take a listen to what she had to say on this.
This volunteering organization making ghillie suits for the defenders. I was listening to these ladies, and they said they were discussing this Trump Crimea situation, and they say, of course, Zelensky would refuse this offer. Even if he would agree to that terms, people in Ukraine would kill him.
Examples like this, I think, show us that not only is Zelensky bound by the Ukrainian constitution, but also public opinion. It's hard to see Ukraine ever accepting this element of Trump's deal. Joe?
Matt Bodner. Matt, thank you so much.
Well, this morning we've got a look at a new NBC News Stay Tuned poll powered by SurveyMonkey that we're rolling out over the next couple days. We focused on a broad range of issues, from the economy to due process protections, even traditional gender roles, to see how members of Gen Z feel about where we are at right now as a country. Take a listen.
25-year-old Claire Joseph is living with her parents to make ends meet.
I can't even afford to rent a place in this area, let alone own anything.
A new NBC News Stay Tuned poll powered by SurveyMonkey shows many young people share her struggles, and 69% of Gen Z poll participants said they disapprove of President Trump's handling of inflation and the cost of living.
I just see my friends running through their savings.
Another area of broad agreement for 18 to 29-year-olds, due process protections for those in the U.S. on a student visa or green card, with 92% of Gen Z saying it's important they're the same as those of U.S. citizens, the highest of any generation polled. 25-year-old Corinne Paulman is not surprised by that number.
I think they should absolutely have the same due process rights as any American.
What do you think the grounds should be for revoking someone's student visa?
God, murder, assault, but not speaking your mind.
23-year-old Jalen Hurts says he also supports due process protections, but thinks some deportations are justified.
I believe if someone is openly expressing hate and violence against the administration or just against the country they're in, I feel like that should revoke the visa.
One of the biggest takeaways, the divide between genders. Asked if America would be stronger if more women held traditional gender roles. Just 26% of young women agreed, compared with 41% of Gen Z men.
I don't want to be perceived as a homemaker. I want to be perceived as me. I'm Corinne.
Do you think that America would be stronger if more women held traditional gender roles?
Oh, 100%. I believe traditional gender roles strengthens the family.
There was also a stark divide between genders on the question of whether they're proud to be American. 41% of Gen Z women said they're not proud, compared to 22% of young men.
Are you proud to be an American?
I am.
But our poll revealed overall, pride is strongest among the oldest Americans and grows weaker with each younger generation.
Are you proud to be an American?
I think that's a complicated answer. I am not proud of what the country is doing right now or the direction we're going. I'm proud of the people who are standing up for it.
So obviously divides among generation, but also among genders. That's something that we saw heading into the election. And again, right now, and it wasn't just on those traditional gender roles, it was actually a lot of different issues. And we've also started to see, which we talked about before, also this creep with young men towards the conservative side of things.
Which was a huge factor on election
Yeah,
which we saw a lot of them following Joe Rogan and many of those conservative podcasts. All right, moving on now. The man accused of killing the CEO of United Healthcare is going to be back in court later today.
26-year-old Luigi Mangione will be arraigned on federal charges, including murder and stalking. Overnight, prosecutors filed an official notice that they will be seeking the death penalty. Mangione also faces state charges in New York and Pennsylvania. He has pleaded not guilty in New York.
For more on what we can expect during today's hearing, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. All right, so he was indicted last week by this federal grand jury in Manhattan on 4 charges. That includes murder through the use of a firearm. We sort of talked about how they had to kind of find a charge that made this sort of a federal case. Talk about that and just what we can expect at the arraignment today.
Arraignments in federal court and in state court are usually not very exciting, but they're important because they're kind of a kickoff to the case. They start a lot of different timelines. The judge will set motion dates and other calendar dates so we can get a real expectation of how long the case will last. And I say that with an asterisk because in large, complicated cases, you can usually expect that there's going to be some kind of continuance requested, and they'll push out those trial dates, especially in this case, because they've already pushed out the indictment and arraignment itself far beyond what you'd normally expect in a federal case. But he'll enter a plea today formally. He could have the indictment read to him. He will waive that reading of the indictment. That would take way too long, and he's got counsel. He doesn't need the indictment read to him. So should be a pretty quick affair.
Danny, how common is it for prosecutors to seek the death penalty in cases like this?
In federal firearm murder cases, I am not even aware of another case where the federal government has sought the death penalty under this subsection of the statute, which is murder through use of a firearm. And I think the defense actually has a strong moral argument that this is not a federal case that should have been brought. Now, you may sit back and say, this Mangione sounds like a terrible guy. Why not charge him in New York state court and federal court? That's not how it works. The defense has raised the very good point that this is a prosecution in state court that adequately vindicates any federal interests that there may be. When you think about it, this is a rarely used piece of the statute because firearm murder is something that happens 15,000 times a year. And you don't see 15,000 federal capital prosecutions for murder with a firearm. We live in a city with plenty of murders using a firearm, and so does everybody across the United States. This is an example of what the federal government, the federal prosecutors do. To an extent, they're designed to cherry pick. They scoop the cream off the top, and they pick the cases they like the best.
So there's a lot going on right now. You've got a case in New York where he's pleaded not guilty. Also, you have Pennsylvania. Then you have the federal case. Explain how these things all happen at the same time. Can some of the state cases influence the federal case or vice versa?
Yes, yes and no. To some degree, the state court case, and this is a little unusual, the New York state case, they got jurisdiction over him first. They got the body first. And the usual rule is that the jurisdiction that gets him first gets to prosecute him first. But I believe prosecutors on the state and federal level are working together to some degree for planning and scheduling purposes. So you can expect the federal case will happen, the trial will happen much after the state court case. The Pennsylvania case, I wouldn't be surprised if that just waits around till all the cases are finished. But in theory, Pennsylvania could say, hey, you know what? We got him first. And in fact, Pennsylvania could have said, we're not even giving him back to New York. We're going to hold on to him. We got him first. We have these charges. But that's an example of states and federal authorities working together to plan out prosecution, a complex prosecution in 3 different jurisdictions.
All right, Danny, thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, the man who opened fire at a 4th of July parade nearly 3 years ago near Chicago will spend the rest of his life behind bars. A judge sentenced Robert Kremo III yesterday to life in prison with no possibility of parole. The 24-year-old killed 7 people, injuring more than 50 others back in 2022. Well, in March, he unexpectedly pleaded guilty to 69 counts of murder and attempted murder. Kremo declined to show up at his 2-day sentencing hearing that began on Wednesday. More than a dozen people shared emotional testimony of the horror they experienced that day.
A 19-year-old in New Jersey is now charged with starting a wildfire that has scorched more than 15,000 acres. Joseph Kling faces arson charges. He's accused of setting wooden pallets on fire, then leaving without properly extinguishing them. Prosecutors say that sparked a fire known as the Jones Road wildfire, which destroyed a commercial building and forced thousands to evacuate. Authorities call it one of the most dangerous fires New Jersey has seen in decades. Kling is set to appear in court next week for a detention hearing.
All right, well, after a string of warm, dry days, a cold front will be moving toward the East Coast today, triggering showers and some thunderstorms from the Ohio Valley to the Gulf Coast just in time for the weekend.
There you go. Let's get a closer look with your Morning News Now forecast. Angie Lastman's here. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning. Savannah, you took the words right out of my mouth. Just in time for the weekend. Unfortunately, yes, it's going to be a little unsettled. It's not going to be the entire weekend for everybody. So let's get you some of those details so you can make those plans. This morning, we're waking up dry for most of us across the West, but notice how unsettled we are, really from the Gulf Coast stretching up to the Midwest. We've got this storm system that's working its way east, and this is what's going to kind of trigger some of that more active weather here as we get through the day today and specifically into your Saturday. Here's where we're expecting the storms to kind of erupt today. It's the Great Lakes stretching down to the southeast. So Knoxville, Cincinnati, Detroit, even folks across parts of the Appalachians will see some of that. The good news is the severe risk across this region, it's quite low. The bad news is we could see some of those really heavy downpours, so I wouldn't be surprised if we do get some localized flooding happening across this region through the day today. Tomorrow, notice what happens, especially for the first half of the day. We've got the soggy conditions in place across the Northeast, specifically New York, Boston. You'll wake up to some wet weather, and then we'll have kind of those occasional showers and storms sticking with us for the first half of the day. This system's going to move offshore and take most of the heavy rain with it by the time we get into the second half of your Saturday. Unfortunately, though, we're not going to rebound to those really nice spring-like temperatures all that fast. We're going to see cooler conditions and breezier conditions settle in for the afternoon hours of your Saturday. And then we really start to see some improvements by the time Sunday rolls around. As far as the severe threat goes this afternoon, we're still going to keep it across parts of the southern plains. It's been quite active over the past few weeks past week or so, I should say, for the central and southern plains. Today is no different. Parts of Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico will see the chance for some of that damaging hail specifically. That's the biggest threat concern, but also maybe an isolated tornado, and we could see some of that damaging wind too. Big picture, look for your rainfall amounts, 1 inch to 2 inches, especially the farther north you go, up across parts of New England. Again, some localized flooding will be a concern across that region, but really it's the southern plains who have had just kind of these repeated rounds of some heavy rain that we'll see here lasting through at least the next couple of days, guys. Temperature-wise, we'll see those mild conditions last for most of the east, at least for today.
Welcome back. As the U.S. and Iran approach their next round of nuclear talks, some key American allies are now signaling they are ready to join the diplomatic effort. France's foreign ministry suggested yesterday the group known as the E3, that's Britain, Germany, and France, is open to a dialogue. It comes as Iran looks to keep up momentum ahead of its third round of talks with the U.S., which start tomorrow in Oman.
Iran is seeking relief from economic sanctions in exchange for limits on its nuclear program. President Trump sounded optimistic when speaking about the progress yesterday, but again warned that the U.S. could resort to military force if diplomacy falls through.
I think we're doing very well with respect to Iran, and we're having very serious meetings. And there are only two options, and the one option is not a good option.
NBC News is the only Western media organization on the ground in Iran right now, and our chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel joins us from Tehran. So, Richard, just how big of a deal is it that these three major European countries could soon join the U.S. and Iran at the negotiating table?
Well, there's a flurry of diplomatic activity right now, and it seems to be growing. There is some momentum that is building. So you mentioned these three European countries, Germany, France, the UK, saying that they want to be part of the process. Iran also reached out to them. The Iranian foreign minister has also recently been to Russia. He's been to China. The defense minister of Saudi Arabia was here in Tehran. That's quite a significant move because traditionally Saudi Arabia and Iran are rivals in this region. And Saudi Arabia did not support previous diplomatic overtures toward Iran. And just a short while ago, in this new Time magazine interview that has just dropped, President Trump said that he's even open to meeting directly with Iran's president or the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. So there is momentum. President Trump says that if diplomacy fails, the military option is still on the table. But there is more flexibility, I would say, coming from Iran, certainly more openness than I've ever experienced covering Iran for many years now. I've been to this country several times, and on this trip, we've been given quite a bit more access. Officials want to talk. They want to, they're allowing us to roam the streets unaccompanied, talk to people. And when we meet people, they want a deal. They want sanctions relief. They want improved relations, and they want to reconnect with the world. They feel that they are misunderstood, isolated, and they're hopeful that if a deal can be reached, that it will have profound implications for the economy and for their lives.
Richard, tell us the details here of what could potentially yield any of that, the terms the U.S. is laying out for an agreement and what Iran is calling for.
Well, these negotiations are taking place behind closed doors, so we don't exactly know the specifics. And there have been some conflicting statements coming from President Trump, who's talked mainly about not allowing Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And Iran says it doesn't want to have a nuclear weapon, and it's open to international inspectors. There used to be an inspection system in place here that went away when President Trump tore up a previous nuclear deal that was signed by President Obama. But the discrepancy seems to be focused on, or the main issue, I should say, is focused on Iran's ability to enrich uranium. Uranium, of course, is one of the key components in nuclear power. It's also a key component in making a nuclear weapon. And you can either enrich it to a low level, 3 or 4%, which is enough for civilian use, or you can enrich it all the way up to 90%, which is weapons grade, something that you could use to make a nuclear weapon. And Iran says it's willing to get rid of its highly enriched uranium and have inspections so that it doesn't enrich to a high degree, but it wants to be able to enrich to that low level, 3 to 4%, so it can have an energy program and make radioactive isotopes for medical purposes and other reasons.
All right. Richard Engel reporting from Tehran. Richard, thank you so much.
Well, this morning we have an up-close look at the notorious prisons in El Salvador. Recent deportations from the U.S. have drawn attention, of course, to the country's mega prisons where thousands have been detained. Now, according to human rights groups, inmates are not able to contact their families or their lawyers. NBC News correspondent David Noriega spoke to one man who managed to get out after being in prison for a year.
No contact with the outside world. Crowded cells with bright lights on 24/7. These are the conditions at Secot, the infamous mega prison where Kilmar Abrego Garcia was first detained. He has since been moved to a different facility.
We know nothing.
And his family's lawyers, who have not been able to contact him, say he has effectively disappeared into the Salvadoran prison system.
Human rights advocates here in El Salvador say that Secot, the famous mega prison, even for its notoriously harsh conditions, is actually one of the better prisons in the country. And that other prisons, like this one behind me, are the site of systematic torture, systematic starvation, sexual assault, and other forms of mistreatment.
At this penitentiary in San Salvador, as in all others across the country, loved ones and lawyers have no way of contacting those inside.
The people detained in the prison don't get a lot of basics like toilet paper, even the clothes that they wear. Their families have to come to this shop and buy it for them. They're not given enough food to sustain themselves, so family members will often buy things like this protein shake so that they have enough nutrition to stay alive.
This couple is here for their son, imprisoned, they say, on a false accusation. It's a common story here. The streets of El Salvador were once ruled by violent gangs. In 2022, President Nayib Bukele suspended constitutional protections, and in the ensuing 3 years, put more than 80,000 people in prison without due process. The streets are much safer. This restaurant owner says she can now run her business without fear of being threatened and extorted. But Salvadorans have a new fear. Stories abound of innocent people swept up and lost with no recourse in a brutal system. Human rights groups have documented 370 deaths in prison since the crackdown, which they say is almost certainly an undercount. The government denied our request for access to various prisons, as well as our request for interviews. Bukele has acknowledged imprisoning some innocent people.
Y estamos liberándolos. Ya hemos liberado 8,000 personas.
But he says thousands have been freed so far, and eventually all will be released. But rights groups say many remain. And those who did get out have horror stories to tell.
Para dormir en el piso, dormíamos como pan de caja.
Victor Barahona, a local journalist, was arrested without explanation and spent close to a year in prison.
Un campo de concentración.
He tells me he spent months crammed in a small cell with 100 men.
No mirábamos el sol.
With no access to daylight and minimal food and water, he contracted skin infections and became delirious.
A mis hijos que los amaba mucho.
One day, convinced he'd die, he asked a younger man to tell his children he loved them.
Discúlpame que recordar.
It's painful, he says, to remember.
Este era yo, mira.
When he was finally released, he had aged dramatically and lost 80 pounds.
Are you afraid of what might happen?
He's one of few people willing to risk reprisals to tell his story.
No tengo nada que perder.
But it's a story, he says, that the world needs to hear. David Noriega, NBC News.
Well, coming up, you snooze, you win. More and more people turning to TikTok for tips on getting a better night's sleep. But do any of those trends actually work?
We're going to get some expert advice that you won't want to sleep on coming up next on Morning News Now.
We're back with a look at the sleep health of Americans. A recent Gallup poll found most U.S. adults say they'd feel a whole lot better with more sleep. A lot of people blame work stress, money worries, or screen time for keeping them up at night.
In an effort to get more rest, people are turning to viral sleep hacks like mouth taping or DIY sleep cocktails. But experts say, no surprise, not all these trendy tricks are safe or even effective.
Caroline Hopkins-Legaspi is a sleep and nutrition reporter for the New York Times. And we've also got our friend, NBC News medical contributor, Dr. Kavita Patel. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for joining us. Caroline, I'll start with you. You recently wrote an article all about these trends and kind of saying this one works, this one doesn't. Here's what experts say. Joe just mentioned some of them. I am so interested in this concept of mouth taping because some people swear by it. Seems kind of scary to me. But that one, those mocktails, even mental exercises, what did you find out works?
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, all you need to do is open the TikTok app or Instagram to see that, you know, we are sort of obsessed with getting better sleep. There's just an endless scroll of different hacks and tricks that people say help them or don't help them. Mouth taping is one of the most popular ones. It just involves exactly what, you know, it says you put a piece of tape over your mouth. And the idea here is that you're forcing yourself to breathe through your nose. And so I asked experts, like, does this really work? And they told me that theoretically breathing through your nose is a better, you know, more efficient way to breathe and it'll prevent snoring. But there's no evidence that actually taping your mouth helps with that. And it could end up being a little bit dangerous because if you're snoring every night and sleeping with your mouth open, you might have obstructive sleep apnea, which is a serious condition that requires treatment. So if you're taping it, it is sort of a Band-Aid, so to speak. Blue light limiting strategies pretty much got the thumbs up because, you know, when we look at blue light, our brain is sort of tricked into thinking it's daytime. So if you're doing that in the evening, you'll be more alert and have trouble falling asleep. But when it comes to the individual products that limit blue light, like different glasses and filters for your screen and night mode, et cetera, there's just not a ton of evidence that those specific products and product features work all that well. So they said, you know, don't rely on those. Like, don't say I'm on night mode so I could be on my phone all night.
Right. So, well, Dr. Patel, let's bring you in here because that same Gallup poll we mentioned, it shows women are much more or less likely to get enough sleep compared with men. The poll found 36% of women compared to 48% of men say they get the sleep they need. Interested in your thoughts on that, but just big picture for everyone. What should you do during the day to improve your odds of sleeping well at night?
Yeah, on the note of women, this is something we've been seeing over decades now, and not surprising, young women especially, but women of all ages are sleeping on average less than men. And stress does appear to play a significant role, even with this gender gap. But I will also say, Joe and Savannah, that there is such little research, i.e. no research, that's been done in really understanding kind of hormonal fluctuations and relationships with sleep. Wow. And I think we're talking a lot about whether it's perimenopause, menopause, but I think about it as kind of around even the onset of puberty. There's such significant changes. They're happening to both men and women, but we've never really taken the time to research or understand these effects. And you can't help but think that if you think about whether it's time around menses or other times if you're ovulating, that 100% is going to affect everything in your body, including your sleep. And then getting to your point about what you can do during the daytime, I try to do this myself. I try to practice what I preach because it's also hard for me to get those 6 to 8 hours of sleep. I basically try to wake up the same time every day. So even on the weekend when I think, oh, I can catch up, I don't have like a 6 a.m. call time for TV or to do something at the clinic, I will still try to make sure I match that. And then I also restructure my brain. I don't think about how tired I am. I think I got the sleep that I'm going to get. I'm going to do the best I can during the day and then focus on the next day.
I mean, there's literally no way I would get up when we have to wake up on Saturday and Sunday. But I know that I think about that a lot because it is such a shift for us on our type of schedule.
It's a different exception. You just have to match the number of hours.
That makes me feel better. Caroline, we just heard some of the kind of hours and guidelines there from Dr. Patel, but what is the specific recommendations for men and women?
Generally what I heard is you want to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And also, you know, again, wake up at that same time every day. I've also heard that if you're so tired on the weekend that you say, you feel you must sleep in, that it's better to wake up at your usual time and then take a nap later.
Oh, that's interesting.
And we've been hearing about the quick naps that you're supposed to take.
Yeah.
Like 10-minute naps we did a story on recently, which I found fascinating and impossible. Dr. Patel, real quick here. At what point should you actually see a doctor about your sleep issues?
Yeah. When it's disturbing kind of your regular pattern, when you notice relationships in your work or in your personal life are starting to decay or starting to shift and change, absolutely, if someone around you who's sleeping in the same room notices that you're not breathing or that you're taking kind of time when you're sleeping to kind of stop breathing, which is why that mouth taping thing is very concerning to many of us that have seen it on TikTok, those are all reasons to seek out medical control. And then I have to say, Joe, Savannah, just watching that previous segment stressed me out. So stress, I would say that you definitely need to kind of listen to your body. If you're feeling tense during the day because of what's happening just in the world, I think it's time to just get some help.
Very good. Caroline, Dr. Patel, thank you both for joining us. Important conversation this morning. All right, coming up, some people are calling it a golden opportunity.
I think the economy is still going to be bad, so it's important that those who have savings invest directly in gold only.
When we return, why more Americans are trading their stocks and bonds for gold bars and coins. You're watching Morning News Now. Welcome back. Now I've got to tell you about a price surge for the world's oldest currency. With so much economic uncertainty from President Trump's tariffs and trade war with China, many Americans have started moving their investments from stocks and bonds to gold, and that has caused the price of gold to skyrocket. But tapping into this new gold rush isn't as simple as it sounds. NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra explains.
You could call it a modern-day gold rush, with gold prices this month reaching all-time highs.
I love gold!
Pricing above $3,000 per ounce.
That's gold, Jerry. Gold!
Fueled in part by economic uncertainty, the roller coaster ride following President Trump's stiff tariffs on international goods and concern about traditional safe havens for money like U.S. Treasury bonds. Overall, the price of gold futures up about 25% so far this year. CNBC reporting more wealthy Americans are turning to Swiss bank accounts, buying physical gold bars to store in those famous Swiss vaults in an effort to flee U.S. risks.
But those investors are trying to not only get out of their political jurisdiction, but get into one that is known to be a very safe haven in terms of gold storage.
It's a trend growing around the world. Some Indonesians hoping the booming price will protect their savings.
I think the economy is still going to be bad, so it's important that those who have savings invest directly in gold only.
And in Dubai's famous gold souk, the price of gold causing sticker shock.
So I think it's better to go with diamonds. It is more affordable than gold.
Here's some things to know if you decide to go for the gold. There's buying gold bars found everywhere, from specialized gold dealers to Costco. But then there's the question of storing it securely. That could involve buying a safe or renting a deposit box at a bank. Another indirect option could be investing in gold mining companies. And there are financial instruments that track the price of gold too, like gold futures and gold ETFs, which trade similar to stocks.
ETFs are easy for gold. They're just like buying any other ETF. You don't have to worry about premiums and storage.
But if great-grandma's outdated bling has been gathering dust in your jewelry box and you want to cash out, there are also options.
A piece like this weighs about 2.5 ounces.
You could try bringing it to a jewelry store and get paid based on the weight and purity.
You could turn the gold right into money right on the spot.
Some shops will buy it to resell the gold or just melt it down and reuse it. But experts say make sure you don't get scammed. Get your gold analyzed and valued by multiple sources. Pawn shops can speed up the process, which may not always provide the most competitive price for your gold.
My best price is $1,100. That is the best I can do.
Remember, each person involved is going to take a cut or a fee.
You want to try to get 50% of the gold value that might be in your jewelry. The refinery has to melt it down. There are costs associated with that. But someone offering you less than 50%, I would shop elsewhere.
Shopping for the best price. Gold standard advice. Marissa Parra, NBC News.
All right, let's get to more money headlines now. iPhones reportedly won't be coming from China for much longer.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and more. Hey, Silvana, good morning.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. Yeah, and that's because Apple aims to import most of the iPhones it sells in the U.S. from India by the end of next year as it shifts away from China in an effort to offset risks from tariffs. Bloomberg and the Financial Times report to do so, Apple will have to roughly double its iPhone production in India. Now, it built $22 billion worth of iPhones there in March and makes about 20% of all iPhones in the country. Alphabet says Waymo's robotaxis may be available for people to own in the future. So Waymo started in 2009 and it was spun out of Google in 2016. It now has more than 700 vehicles in its fleet, with 300 of those in San Francisco, and it is the only firm that operates robotaxis that collect fares for rides. Analysts say it will likely offer ownership through a partnership as it doesn't build its own cars, instead working with Uber, Hyundai, Jaguar, and others. And California Governor Gavin Newsom says the Golden State has overtaken Japan to become the world's fourth largest economy. Now, that's based on nominal GDP, which reached $4.1 trillion last year, edging just past Japan's $4 trillion. That means only the U.S. as a whole, China, and Germany have larger economies. California accounting for 14% of U.S. GDP last year. That's according to government data, driven by the tech sector in Silicon Valley, as well as real estate and finance sector, guys. That is huge.
The country of California.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. All right. Thanks, Silvana.
That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now. Good morning. It is Friday. Thanks for being here. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, a fond farewell to the late Pope Francis. Thousands of the world's Catholics joining those long lines at the Vatican. It's a final chance to pay their final respects to the pontiff ahead of tomorrow's funeral. We've got team coverage. Also this morning, a rare rebuke of Vladimir Putin fired off by President Trump. He's scolding the Russian leader on social media after Moscow launched its deadliest attack on Ukraine's capital city in nearly a year. Comes as the commander-in-chief faces new challenges and criticism here at home and abroad, with that critical 100-day mark approaching. If you've been feeling a little uneasy about the economy lately, well, you are not alone. A new survey shows 85% of Americans are anxious over potential price hikes. So what does it all mean for your bottom line? If you're looking for, say, a new car, if you're planning that next vacation, we're watching your wallet. Plus, if it's Friday, that can mean only one thing here on Morning News Now. Grab your AM popcorn. We've got your ticket to the latest and greatest in the world of Hollywood and beyond. It's everything you simply can't miss this weekend. Decided AM popcorn is like coffee flavored.
Yeah, I know.
Your coffee-flavored popcorn, a little
really
jolt of caffeine.
Yeah.
All right, good to have you with us. Let's begin with mourners saying their final goodbyes to Pope Francis this morning as the Vatican prepares to lay him to rest. Today is the last day the Pope's body lies in state at St. Peter's Basilica. Tens of thousands of worshipers have already come to the Vatican to pay their respects to the late pontiff, who's being remembered for his humility and his kindness.
American Cardinal Kevin Farrell, who is temporarily leading the Vatican until a new pope is chosen, will preside over a ceremony later today to seal Pope Francis's coffin. His funeral then will be held tomorrow. NBC News senior national correspondent and top story anchor Tom Yamas is at the Vatican with more.
On this last day of public viewing, the crowd swelling in size. Down in St. Peter's Square, we can see it from this balcony here. The lines are moving, but they're larger today than they were yesterday. They had thinned out a little bit on that second day of viewing, and there's a couple of factors why. One, it is a holiday here in Italy. It's the weekend, but also the clock is ticking on that public viewing to end, which will be 7 p.m. local here in Vatican City. All of this in the lead up, of course, to the funeral that will bring together world leaders and the public to say goodbye to Pope Francis.
Early this morning, the faithful crowding St. Peter's Square on this final day of public viewing. More than 128,000 people have flowed through this area into the Basilica to say goodbye to Pope Francis.
A lot of emotions, you know. We have great feelings for Pope Francis.
And this moment now being shared around the world. Vatican cameras capturing a nun who was a close friend of Pope Francis allowed to approach the coffin. As she pauses, she begins to weep. You can hear her as she's overcome with grief. Even those who didn't know Pope Francis describe a similar feeling.
What was that moment like?
It's kind of hard to put into words. It was very emotional.
Rome officials expect more than 100,000 to show up Saturday morning and pack St. Peter's Square for the Pope's funeral. The Vatican says delegations from 130 countries will be there, with 50 heads of state, including President Trump. Following the funeral, Pope Francis's body will be transported through the streets of Rome. The route, which police shared with NBC News, will pass near the Forum and the Colosseum, ending up at Santa Maria Maggiore. He will be the first pope to be buried outside Vatican walls in more than 120 years. The Vatican releasing this photo of his tomb, just one word inscribed on it, Franciscus. And overnight, cardinals praying the rosary outside of Francis's final resting place. The church housing the most important icon to Mary. You see it here. Pope Francis would visit it before and after every trip. The College of Cardinals is busy at work preparing for the conclave, the ancient and secretive process in selecting the next pope. The start date expected to be announced following Pope Francis's funeral. The Vatican now simultaneously preparing for an end and a new beginning.
And tomorrow, that funeral mass, according to the Vatican, is expected to last about 90 minutes, and then the procession. If you were to walk it, it's about 55 minutes, so it'll probably be a couple of hours, but it's one more opportunity for the public to get up close to the Pope that they love so much.
All right, Tom Yalmas, thank you so much.
For more, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson, who joins us from the Vatican with more. Ann, good morning. So these funeral proceedings for Pope Francis will be set in motion later today when American Cardinal Kevin Farrell does preside over a ceremony sealing that coffin. What more can you tell us about that ceremony and some of the rituals that will follow?
One of the things that will happen, Joe, is they will place a white veil over Pope Francis' face. Then they will take a zinc cover and affix that with seals, and then they will take the wooden cover and then close that, and that will be affixed with a cross. And inside, before they even do that, they place a bag of coins that had been minted during his pontificate. And they also place something called a regito, which is a tube with a piece of paper outlining the accomplishments of his pontificate. All of this is laid out. It's very much ritualistic. Francis didn't really fool with this part of it. He streamlined much of these proceedings, including the fact he's only buried in one coffin, not the traditional three. But this one will go as it has been for centuries in the Catholic Church.
And this is so much more than a funeral. Talk about how does it signify just what's next for the church?
Well, that's the big question everybody's asking. I think one of the things you will see tomorrow after the funeral, you'll see this motorcade as Pope Francis' body is brought from the Vatican to Santa Maria Maggiore, as Tom mentioned. And that is a basilica in Rome. It's about a 3-mile route. And the Pope is not just the leader of more than 1 billion Catholics. He's also the Bishop of Rome. So it's the final chance for the people of that city, no matter what their faith, to say goodbye to him.
And Cardinal Farrell was the one who was handpicked by Pope Francis to lead the Vatican until another pope is chosen. I just feel like people who saw the movie Conclave will just automatically start thinking the Ralph Fiennes character here. Help us sort fact from fiction and just tell us what his role is going to look like throughout this funeral and then with the conclave.
He's the Camerlengo, and basically he is the administrator of the Vatican in this period when we are between popes. And as you said, he was handpicked by Francis. He's someone who Francis trusts implicitly. He was born in Dublin, and he served in the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., and he was the Bishop of Texas. And then Pope Francis brought him over here to run basically the Department of Laity. That is the relations between the church and the lay people. He is a very trusted member of Pope Francis' inner circle. So he has had a big role this past week overseeing all of the formalities. But tomorrow's funeral will be overseen by the Dean of the College of Cardinals, Cardinal Baptista Rey.
And Ann, real quickly, a question that maybe is a little unfair to ask, but as we do look ahead to the conclave, are we hearing anything about possible successors for Francis?
It's not unfair at all to ask, Joe. Let me just give you a few names that are being mentioned. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, he is the Secretary of State. A man who's thought of as the Asian Francis, Cardinal Luis Tagle from the Philippines and now based here in Rome. And then everybody's favorite name, Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa. He is the Patriarch of Jerusalem, and he did the most courageous thing after the war broke out in Gaza. He actually offered himself as a hostage to Hamas in exchange for Israeli children, and that got a lot of attention. He's one of the people being listed as a possible successor, but that list is long.
All right. Ann Thompson, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Well, as Tom mentioned, President Trump will be making the trip to Rome, but it comes amid a series of economic and foreign policy challenges as he approaches the 100-day mark of his second term. China is again denying U.S. claims that both countries have held trade talks, while the president delivered a rare criticism of Russian President Putin following the recent assault on Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake has the latest.
Thank you very much.
As his presidency approaches the 100-day mark, President Trump's efforts to enact his sweeping agenda are meeting new resistance this morning, with the U.S. and China locked in a trade war with no end in sight. The president insisting Thursday there have been discussions with China on lowering tariffs.
Well, they had a meeting this morning, so I can't tell you. It doesn't matter who they is. And we've been meeting with China.
But the Chinese Foreign Ministry saying this morning, quote, China and the United States have not held any consultations or negotiations on tariffs, and the United States should not mislead the public. And China not the only country publicly derailing Trump's agenda. The president's campaign pledge to end the war in Ukraine on day one has collided with reality, with efforts to negotiate a deal between Russia and Ukraine now stalled. After Russia launched its deadliest assault in nearly a year on Ukraine's capital of Kyiv. President Trump delivering a rare rebuke of Russian President Vladimir Putin on social media, writing, quote, Vladimir, stop.
I didn't like last night. I wasn't happy with it.
Asked what concessions Russia has offered.
Stopping the war, taking the whole country. Pretty big concession.
But it was Ukraine's military who halted the Russian invasion. Overnight, Russia launching new strikes, including over 100 drone attacks, Ukraine says. And during those major foreign policy clashes, the administration facing controversy from within the Pentagon. Two sources familiar with the situation telling NBC News that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has become, quote, erratic, and he seems increasingly insecure about his job.
I don't have time for leakers.
The Pentagon's senior staff also facing turmoil. Hegseth accusing the acting chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of leaks and threatening to polygraph him, according to 3 U.S. officials familiar with the meeting. And after allegations that Hegseth texted military information to a private signal group, Trump called it, quote, childish in a call to the defense secretary and indicated he wasn't pleased, according to 2 U.S. officials. But, one said, the president told the defense secretary to keep fighting.
Garrett Haake, thank you so much. U.S. and Iranian officials are sounding optimistic as they approach their 3rd round of nuclear talks tomorrow in Oman. Iran is seeking relief from years of punishing economic sanctions in exchange for limits on its nuclear program. NBC News is the only Western media organization on the ground in Iran right now. Our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, joins us with the latest from Tehran. Richard, good morning.
Good morning. There is now a flurry of diplomatic activity, and there does seem to be some momentum. Now, European nations are getting involved. This is after Iran's foreign minister and other officials have already been meeting with the Russians, Chinese, Saudi Arabians, and generally Iran is pleased or encouraged, I should say, by what they're hearing from President Trump, who's just said in a new interview that he's open to meeting Iran's president or even this country's supreme leader. President Trump is sounding upbeat about nuclear talks with Iran.
I think we're doing very well on an agreement with Iran. We could have a very, very good decision, and a lot of lives will be saved.
At the heart of the negotiations is Iran's enrichment of radioactive uranium, which can be used to make electricity or bombs. Iran is showing more flexibility and openness than it has in years. In Tehran, we were given rare access to parliament. Ibrahim Rezai, a member of the National Security Committee, told me Iran doesn't want a nuclear bomb.
The international inspections have been problematic. Is Iran willing to do more to be more open and transparent?
If Americans are concerned about us having nuclear weapons, we are ready to accept reasonable verification in return for lifting all sanctions, he said. This week, the International Atomic Energy Agency announced it's in talks to reinstall cameras at Iran's nuclear facilities, removed after President Trump walked away from a deal signed under President Obama. Across Iran, there's excitement now that a new deal could reconnect this country to the world. And change here is happening that few outside ever get to see, like these young entrepreneurs at the Azadi Innovation Factory.
Iran is so heavily sanctioned. What's it like living and working in what is effectively a box?
Yeah, I can tell you that it's difficult. We have made it, but if we get outside the box, we can also, have a bright future.
Do you think people misunderstand what's going on in this country?
We haven't had the opportunity to, show who we really are and what we really think. And it's kind of sad, but it has always been like that, unfortunately.
Iranians are confident, if given a chance, this ancient country, isolated for decades, would thrive. So far, there has not been any response officially from the Iranian government about this proposal, this overture, this willingness that President Trump says that he has to meet either Iran's president or even the supreme leader. And it's not clear we're going to get one. Iranian officials are, at this very moment, being quite close-lipped. They are closing ranks. They don't want to send competing messages as they enter this next round of negotiations tomorrow in Oman. Joe?
All right. Richard Engel. Richard, thank you so much.
Well, back here in New York, Luigi Mangione, the man accused of murdering Brian Thompson, that's the CEO of United Healthcare, is due in federal court today. He's set to be arraigned on federal charges, and one of the counts makes the 26-year-old Ivy League grad eligible for the death penalty. NBC News senior national correspondent Stephanie Gosk is outside the courthouse here in New York City, where the arraignment will take place in just a few hours. Hey, Stephanie, good morning.
Savannah, good morning. Luigi Mangione faces both state charges and federal charges. That's why he's here in this federal courthouse today. He was indicted just last week. But unlike the state case, in the federal case, his life is on the line. Prosecutors say they are seeking the death penalty. Accused killer Luigi Mangione back in court today, this time facing federal charges for the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. The 26-year-old expected to plead not guilty to 4 counts, including murder with a firearm and stalking. Overnight, federal prosecutors making it official, submitting notice to the court that they are seeking the death penalty. Writing, Mangione presents a future danger because he expressed intent to target an entire industry and rally political and social opposition. Adding he was armed with a privately manufactured firearm and silencer. The federal case being brought on top of state murder charges, which rarely happens, according to some legal experts.
There are approximately 15,000 intentional firearm homicides a year in the United States. And I'd be willing to bet that well less than 1% of them ever get prosecuted by the federal government.
Earlier this month, Attorney General Pam Bondi speaking about the case.
If there was ever a death case, this is one. This guy is charged with hunting down a CEO, a father of 2, a married man, hunting him down and executing him.
In response, Mangione's attorney filed a motion to throw out the death penalty, calling it a political stunt, adding, because the attorney general has chosen to proceed in this way, her client's rights have been violated. The shocking murder of CEO Brian Thompson on the streets of New York City and the manhunt for his killer captured national headlines for weeks. A high-profile crime that may partly explain the federal government deciding to step in with separate charges.
Is the federal government cherry-picking? Yes, but that's what federal prosecution is.
The murder triggered a national conversation about health care, some supporting Mangione. Donations for his legal fund nearing $1 million. Prosecutors say heart-shaped letters were discovered in socks sent to him while he awaits trial in a federal prison. Supporters also rallying online.
Luigi Mangione stuns in new photo.
And showing up in person every time Mangione appears in court.
People are unlikely to see Luigi Mangione today because this is a federal courthouse. Unless they get one of the few public seats in the courtroom, there are strict rules against cameras. He's going to be brought in a secure entrance where there is no public access, Savannah.
All right, Stephanie, thank you so much.
Let's take a look at what to expect this weekend with your morning news now. Weather.
We've got Angie Lastman in studio with us. Hi, Angie. Good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning. We made it to Friday, last day of the work week, and we've got a little bit of some trouble brewing when it comes to the weather over the weekend. We've got this storm system that we've essentially been watching across parts of the plains, and it's on the move today and into tomorrow, specifically for parts of the east. You'll notice we're already waking up quite unsettled, stretching from parts of the southeast into the Ohio Valley, up through parts of the Midwest and the Great Lakes. That's kind of the area that we're going to mainly focus on for the impactful weather for today. You can see some of that working through here as the day goes on. Those springtime storms are expected anywhere from essentially the Great Lakes down to the southeast. Good news is severe risk is low. Bad news is we've got plenty of rain to tap into, so I wouldn't be surprised if we do deal with a little bit of flooding. We ramp up the moisture for tomorrow, and it works right through the Northeast just in time for those early Saturday morning plans. So the showers, the thunderstorms, there'll be a potential for those across this region. New York, Boston, Washington, D.C., all could see that for the first half of Saturday. The second half of Saturday looks a little better, especially when we're considering those sky conditions. We'll see most of the rain sit offshore by the time we get into the evening hours. Still a little bit left over, but much drier, especially the farther west you go. The bad news is it'll be cooler than it has been over the past couple of days. So those really mild and even warmer than normal temperatures will be out of here for a short term, and we'll be left with cooler and breezier conditions behind it for the rest of the weekend. Your severe threat today, though, still remains over parts of the plains. We've got the southern plains impacted by this today. Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico. Hail, wind gusts, and maybe a tornado or two. It'll be brief, but even still, this afternoon and this evening, we're watching for that, and it'll be centered right with basically Lubbock in the bullseye of that. Now, through the next couple of days, we've got the potential for some flash flooding, specifically across the middle of the country, but we're going to get a good dose of rain for the Northeast. This is important, guys, and the Mid-Atlantic, too, because we are dealing with drought conditions in some of these spots. And we saw this week what happened with that Jones Road fire. This is going to offer up a little bit of relief for folks out there. And we will, however, deal with the flash flooding concern, specifically as we get through the later parts of today over Oklahoma and Texas. So heads up there. Meanwhile, warm temperatures lasting in the east for now. We've got upper 70s and 80s again, but that'll come to an end. But guess what? Look ahead to next week, okay? Yay! Come on, I'm delivering.
Did you just quickly advance past the bad weekend?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Like, ignore that day or two.
That's what happens when you're in charge.
Not happening. I thought it was like tomorrow. Never mind.
If only you could do that to control the actual weather. Now, that would be something. It's like, storms be gone. Storms be gone.
Can you imagine how powerful I'd be?
Yeah.
It does look like
more friends.
Would I be
more
a
friends.
I don't know.
Hard to believe.
Here it looks like it just rains in the morning, though, and then it's gone.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be some occasional showers left over for the second half of Saturday, but Sunday will be much brighter.
Okay.
How about that?
And colder.
Thanks, Angie. Got it.
Much more to come here on this hour of Morning News Now, including some new numbers on how exactly Americans are feeling about President Trump's tariff push and all the uncertainty it's causing from Main Street to Wall Street.
Up first, though, after the break, we'll take you back to the Vatican with more on the progressive legacy left behind by Pope Francis as Catholics from across the globe pay their final respects ahead of tomorrow's funeral. That's up next. Stay with us. We are back with more on the life and legacy of Pope Francis this morning as thousands continue to fill St. Peter's Square to say their final goodbyes. We're looking at a lasting impact that's still reverberating across the church. His elevation of women to positions of power.
For an institution that's been led almost exclusively by men for centuries, these moves were groundbreaking, and they raise big questions about what comes next. NBC News international correspondent Molly Hunter takes a closer look.
One of the lasting legacies Pope Francis leaves is a handful of very talented women he elevated to senior positions, always held by men. Back in 2016, a headline-grabbing appointment. With the first Latin American pope came the first Spanish-speaking spokesperson.
Extremely difficult, extremely beautiful, and the honor of my life.
Paloma Garcia Ovaher was the first woman to serve as the deputy director of the Holy See press office. She credits Francis with pulling the church in line with society outside of Vatican City.
It's just the beginning. He did baby steps regarding women, top-level positions, but there's no way back.
But she was the first of many.
He made the head of the Vatican Museums, the director of the Vatican Museums, which is the second largest museum in the world, right after the Louvre. He gave this appointment to Barbara Yatta, and he gave it to a very skilled woman who's been able to face the challenges of a museum that receives 6.7 million visitors a year.
Several years later, Pope Francis gave the first woman voting rights in the Synod, the church's governing body, and later appointed the first woman to lead a major Vatican department. And from his hospital bed last month, his most high-profile appointment yet.
One of the last things that Pope Francis did was he confirmed the appointment of Sister Raffaella Petrini, who is essentially running the governatorato. Basically, she's the governor of Vatican City. And the way they talk about the arrival of Sister Raffaella, they talk about, and then the sister came, and everything started to get better. What Pope Francis has done is simply taken these women, these religious sisters or lay women, who have worked behind the scenes, carrying this incredible burden on their shoulders.
And given them the title.
Put them in the front lines. Put them in the limelight. Finally gave them the spotlight that they deserve.
Lavinia Roque Carrera is the Secretary General of the World Union of Catholic Women's Organizations and says Francis will be remembered for what she calls the appreciation of women.
An appreciation of women, which has translated into serious roles of power.
Yes, not only, but also listening to the most marginalized women.
Which was core to his mission. She also points out that it was no secret the new appointments brought some order.
He once mentioned that everything was working much better since they were there.
Not surprised.
Much more accurate, much more organized.
And this week, inside St. Peter's Basilica, as thousands filed past to say their final goodbyes, 81-year-old French-Argentine nun, Sister Genevieve Genengro, approached Francis's open coffin, a restricted area reserved for cardinals, bishops, and Catholic priests, in other words, for men. When she burst into tears, no one interrupted her. She was allowed her moment of personal grief, a break in protocol, though one that Francis may have approved of.
Thanks to Molly Hunter for that great report there.
We have breaking news this morning out of Russia, where a senior Russian military general has been killed by a car bomb.
NBC News reporter Matt Bodner is here with that and some other international headlines. Matt, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. The name of the officer killed in this car explosion is Yaroslav Moskalik, and he was killed just outside of Moscow. Moskalik held the rank of Major General, and he worked as the deputy head of the General Staff's main operations directorate. It's a very senior posting. Russia's foreign ministry was quick to call the incident terrorism and suggested Kyiv was behind it. Back in December, Ukrainian intelligence assassinated Russian Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov with a bomb hidden in an electric scooter. And just hours after this attack, Trump envoy Steve Witkoff was received in the Kremlin to meet with Putin. Moving along now to Kashmir. Tensions between India and Pakistan continue to rise following Tuesday's killing of 26 tourists in the India-controlled part of Kashmir. No group has officially taken credit for the attack, but India has since closed its main border crossing with Pakistan, expelled military attachés, and suspended a water-sharing treaty. Local police have named 3 of the 4 militants they suspect carried out the attack, saying 2 of them are Pakistani nationals, and all 4 of them are members of a Pakistani militant group. And we'll wrap up this hour with some space news. The Chinese National Space Agency says it will allow scientists from 6 countries, including the United States, to examine moon rocks recovered by a space probe back in 2020. This is actually very nice of them, seeing as NASA has never allowed Chinese scientists to examine its lunar samples that were brought back by the Apollo missions in the late 60s and early 70s. Congress prohibits NASA from doing any work with the Chinese. Chinese samples are reported to be very different from those collected from the Apollo landing sites. Back to you guys.
Space diplomacy there.
Exactly. Thanks, Matt. Coming up, a deepening crisis with some of our ocean's most vibrant communities at the center.
After the break, why experts are now sounding the alarm over climate change's impact on coral reefs across the globe. What's being done to conserve those radiant colors? That's next. We are back with an urgent crisis unfolding along the Southern California coast. Researchers say that dolphins and other marine animals are washing up sick, even dead, at levels we have never seen before. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz has the details.
Across the Southern California coast, thousands of marine animals washing up sick or even dead over the past several weeks, including whales, sea lions, and most notably an unprecedented number of dolphins.
We've never seen this many dolphins strand ever that I'm aware of in Southern California, and it's heartbreaking.
This week, 16 dolphins found dead at just one beach in San Diego, more than 50 found along the LA County coast, this humpback whale washing up in the city of Ventura.
How would you compare this year to what we've seen in the past years?
Worse, bad, horrible, scary, concerning, all those words and more.
Scientists say the cause believed to be poisoning from toxic algae blooms that produce a neurotoxin called domoic acid that gets into the animal's food chain.
We had 9 yesterday alone.
The Marine Mammal Care Center Los Angeles says so far this year they've taken in 375 animals. Their typical budget for the entire year, 300.
We're having to pick and choose which animals we respond to, which animals can come in for care.
Scientists say they're now looking into whether debris runoff into the ocean after the LA fires is playing a role in the outbreak.
It has to have a contributing factor. Fire retardant is really fertilizer. That is food for algae. So it's sort of a logical assumption that that's going to feed the algae bloom.
Liz Kreutz, NBC News.
And that's not the only marine crisis that has many scientists concerned this morning. 84% of the world's coral reefs have been hit by the worst bleaching event on record. Researchers say heat stress from increasingly warm ocean temperatures is mostly to blame. Mary Aiken joins us now with more on this. Mark Aiken. He's the corresponding secretary for the International Coral Reef Society. Mark, good morning. Thanks so much for being here. So this is now the 4th global bleaching event since 1998. First, can you start by just explaining what that means, what bleaching actually is, and also how you kind of compare each of those events, how they've changed over time?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here. Coral reefs are one of the most important marine ecosystems on Earth. They're the most diverse. They support about 25% of all marine species, and they're the main source of food and source of income for 500 million to 1 billion people around the world. These coral reefs are made up of organisms that are really animal, vegetable, and mineral. It's an animal with microscopic plants living inside its tissues, and the combination grows these big limestone structures. When the water gets too hot, the relationship between the animal and the plants breaks down. The corals expel the algae into the water. Now, scientists are able to both monitor and predict when coral bleaching is going to occur by looking at the sea surface temperatures. When the temperatures get too high, this relationship between the corals and the algae breaks down, and that's when bleaching occurs. These global bleaching events, like we're seeing now for the 4th time, can be measured by looking at these satellite records across the globe and determining when the heat stress level is high enough to cause bleaching in at least 10% of the reefs in all 3 ocean basins.
Mark, people might not even realize also 25% of all marine species are found in and around coral reefs, which I think, just makes people really think about this more, care about it a lot. You say that the best way to save coral reefs is to address human emissions as the root of climate change. But while a lot of people see burning fossil fuels as this tool for economic growth, that's tough. Obviously, we've tried passing legislation. Some of that's been undone. What efforts are being done to try to conserve the reefs? And for someone listening at home, what could they do?
Individuals need to think about how they're dealing with their home waste, what they're putting in their trash. Recycling is good. What they're doing, however, as people who use fossil fuels is the most important. Individuals addressing their carbon footprint, but more importantly, we need to be dealing with moving the economy off of fossil fuels. That's the single best way we can protect coral reefs, because all the local efforts won't do any good if we don't address that root problem.
Mark Aiken, such an important conversation. Thank you very much for joining us for it this morning. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Coming up, no secret, many Americans are growing anxious about how those White House tariffs might impact their finances.
After the break, we're watching your money with some tips and tricks to help you navigate all the uncertainty and spots where you can even catch a deal. That's next on Morning News Now. Welcome back. Let's get you some financial news now. Workers at Intel are the latest to get a return to office order.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and some other money news. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Savannah. Good morning. Yeah, Intel is mandating employees work from the office 4 days a week. It's a shift from current policy. Now, the chipmaker's new CEO making that announcement during Intel's earnings call last night. Previously, it allowed staff to work from home 2 days a week. But the CEO says the hybrid policy has been, quote, uneven at best. The changes go into effect in September. Netflix has a new option for subtitles that just shows spoken dialogue. It has offered subtitles for the deaf or hard of hearing, which show dialogue along with the names of speakers and descriptions of sounds. This new option drops those cues, and it's currently only available in English and for Netflix original titles. The company says nearly half of all viewing hours take place with subtitles for captions. And Burger King has something extra sweet for you this summer. It's unveiling a new frozen beverage with an ice blast of strawberry flavor that customers can also top with a layer of Nerds candy. Now, to celebrate the arrival and in honor of National Strawberry Month, Burger King customers can enjoy a free drink with a purchase of $1 or more every Saturday in May.
Trying to remember the last time I had Nerds candy.
Okay, have you had Nerds clusters?
Yes.
Those are amazing.
And they went like crazy viral. Couldn't you not find them for a while?
They are so good.
Yeah.
So good.
Silvana was driving the shortage. Silvana, thank you so much.
You got it.
All right, if you're worried about how the trade war will impact your finances, you're not alone.
Yeah, a recent survey by NerdWallet found 85% of Americans are concerned about these new tariffs. Folks are especially worried about whether they can afford everyday necessities.
Well, lucky for us, we've got NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans on hand. Hi, good morning. So it's so good to have you with us. One of the biggest things people are worried about specifically is affording a car and how what's going on here with tariffs is going to impact that. Is it a good time to buy? Should you not yet?
There's so much confusion around the state of play in the tariff world. I'm going to be really honest. Even today, there's even more headlines this morning. Yeah. China saying they're not even talking. The car industry is saying they would like to have some carve-outs for imported car parts because that's the way cars are. We just don't know where this is going to all land. But if you are looking to buy a new car, this is a good time to look. And you should be looking at the dealer inventories that are on the lots right now. We know that Ford and Stellantis, that's the maker of like Dodge and Ram, they're offering employee pricing, which is a good pricing for their cars that are on the lots right now as they await the new models and the new shipments that will be much, much more expensive.
Electronics are another point of concern. We're seeing people panic buying iPhones right now. What is the best advice?
So I don't think you should panic buy anything. It's never good for your budget. But if you need a new electronic, you should buy it now. I mean, I don't think it's going to be cheaper in 6 months. It could only be more expensive in 6 months. However, if you don't need to upgrade your iPhone, don't rush after the next one if you don't need. I mean, if your iPhone is fine, keep your iPhone, frankly. But tech accessories like keyboards, Logitech keyboards, gaming accessories and consoles, these are all things that we think are going to start rising in price and probably pretty quickly. So if you need to replace the keyboard, I would say do it.
Another big category, toys. What should we know here?
This is going to be really difficult. And you have the Apollo chief economist this morning, that's a big financial firm, warning of shortages, empty store shelves. We're talking about back to school time, the holiday shopping season. If these all stay in effect, 75% or 85% of toys in this country are imported. And there could be jobs lost in relation to this. Independent toy stores are going to really have some trouble here. The trucking companies that move this stuff around, they are going to see layoffs. That's what this CEO, this chief economist is saying. So if you need toys, value retailers right now, they have big inventories, secondhand marketplaces online, but be prepared that you could see store shelves empty.
Before we get to back to school, before we get to the holidays, we've got a lot of summer travel. People are wondering about that. We've seen this uncertainty from the airlines, but are there good deals right now?
So because the consumer is pulling back, there are great deals. This is Going.com. Scott Keyes is the founder there. I talked to him yesterday, and he was ticking off all of these great deals right now, especially really good deals to Canada, because guess what? Canadians are not coming to the U.S. as much as they were, and these companies would like to keep their flights going, and so they're lowering their airfares. American Airlines, Southwest Airlines says it's probably going to start having to cut some flights because they're seeing consumer demand wait. So last year, think about last year, record year for travel. by all indications, it was going to be another one. In 3 months, everything has changed. And so these companies are pulling their Wall Street guidance. They can't even say what it's going to look like in the next 3, 6 months, 12 months. It's just really wild.
I was on a couple Southwest flights this week, and they weren't packed, which stunned me a little bit.
Yeah,
So,
it is turned on a dime.
Yeah.
The travel frenzy, and then now all of a sudden, after what's happened to the stock market and listening to headlines about trade, people are really pulling in their horns.
Christine, thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Let's close out Earth Week with a look at how the homes and buildings of the future are being designed to withstand the growing threat of extreme weather, from flooding to storm pollution.
It's not just about sturdy materials. It's about rethinking the way we build from the ground up. NBC News Now anchor Vicki Nguyen got a first-hand look at how one building in Virginia is turning heads with design ideas that could protect your own home.
In cities stretching all across the country, communities getting ravaged by vicious storms. And as extreme weather becomes more frequent, so does the damage to schools, businesses, and homes. But imagine if you could protect your home from water and flooding.
It's super important that we have projects like this that show people what they can do.
That's the vision of a trailblazing project here in Norfolk, Virginia, where the Elizabeth River is ground zero for rising sea levels and a sinking shoreline.
You kind of got a double whammy.
We do.
Marjorie Mayfield Jackson helped launch a revitalization effort nearly 3 decades ago, bringing life back to waters that were once so polluted the fish were cancerous. Now, healthy trout have returned, bringing with them otters and dolphins and an innovative new building along the riverbank, the Ryan Resilience Lab.
What do you hope people take away when they come and visit this place?
Hope and inspiration to act.
The lab showcases inventive and practical ways homeowners and builders can design structures to endure severe weather and combat pollution. Sam Bowling is the lab's lead architect.
Sam, what was your North Star when designing this building?
The thing we kept in mind from the very beginning was sustainability, resilience to flooding, and accessibility. We wanted to make sure that every solution was something that someone could buy off the shelf, put together with parts, do it themselves, or find someone locally who could do that for them.
You gonna show me around?
Absolutely, let's go.
Okay, let's go.
First, the building is above ground to allow floodwaters a place to flow. Underneath, massive tanks that can hold 10,000 gallons of rainwater for irrigation and plumbing. He says smaller, consumer-friendly versions can easily be installed in any backyard.
You can capture rainwater off of your house. It's usable for a lot of things.
This can reduce your water bill.
Well, it can.
At the ground level, permeable pavers reflect sunlight and reduce heat. Plus,
what happens when rain falls on these pavers versus regular pavement?
The rain is going to drain down, and then it's going to be captured in this big reservoir of gravel underneath, keeping pollution out of the river.
On the southern side, a green wall of vines.
It can help you keep cool in the summer. It can also help you stay warm in the wintertime.
And it reduces your energy bill.
It does.
Inside, the carpet is made from recycled fish nets recovered from the ocean, and triple-paned windows, available at local hardware stores, insulate the building.
So where are we going next?
We're going to go up onto the roof. This is where we have our living roof. Living roofs help slow down stormwater. Rain that falls on this just gets soaked up and held. Living roofs can also help insulate your existing flat roofs. Reduces the energy you have to expend to heat and cool the building, reduces your energy bill.
How easy is it to install something like this on an existing home or business? Pretty easy?
Fairly straightforward, yeah.
And not too expensive?
Not too expensive.
I see these tubes that look kind of like a xylophone.
Yeah.
What do those do?
Those are solar hot water heaters.
While everything here is designed to reduce impact on the environment, the larger goal is to have an impact on people.
What's the feedback you're getting from people who visit and say, hey, we can actually do this where we live?
They're so excited. They want to have more resources. They come back with their neighbors and friends and colleagues. So it's a new day on the Elizabeth River, and I hope it's giving hope around the world.
Wow, pretty cool to see.
Yeah,
Vicki climbing that ladder.
Thank you, Vicki. All right, it's Friday. That can mean only one thing here on Morning News Now.
We've got your ticket to the latest and greatest from the world of Hollywood and beyond, including a hot new soundtrack for your weekend, the debut album of actress and singer Coco Jones, everything that you simply can't miss. Up next. Finally this hour, it is Friday, which means it's time for your weekly can't miss list.
It's a look at all the movie shows, music you need to hear and see this weekend.
And here to help us out with Can't Miss, let's bring in NBC New York digital reporter and friend of the show, Kay Agram.
Let's go.
Hey, great to have you with us. Always good to see you.
It's great to be here.
We're going to start with The Accountant 2.
Yes.
8 years after the first. Tell us what we know.
Can you believe it? Okay, so this one is starring Ben Affleck and John Bernthal, and they both play brothers that team up to essentially try and find the accountant, but also take on the bad guys, this network of killers. And so what's really great about this is it's a buddy comedy. It's super funny, action-packed. A lot of the reviews online, people are saying it's an instant classic.
Wow.
I'll leave that up to you to decide.
Wow.
But,
and it's in theaters?
And it's in theaters today,
Okay.
yes, exactly. And so I think it's projected to make $25 million or something like that this opening weekend. And the studio, Amazon MGM, essentially they've dropped like 10 movies this year. This would be their highest opening weekend one. So people are really excited about it.
Box office needs a boost. And it's not about taxes. So there you go. All right. Also in theaters, you got On Swift Horses. It's set in the 1950s. This one really intrigues me because it's a look at really hidden queer lives during a period when it was tough to be openly queer.
Exactly, and that was the 1950s. And so essentially you've got Jacob Elordi, Daisy Edgar Jones, Will Poulter, Diego Calva, Sasha Callier, and it's an impressive cast ensemble. It's a queer melancholic drama about that love and what that's like to long for someone when at a time where that love is forbidden. And so essentially it's got beautiful shots, compelling storylines, and I think to your point, it's going to be a really good big one for folks.
Another one in theaters. Tell us about, we've got a new A24 film, which those are always a big deal, but this one's like kind of a different vibe for them.
We love an A24 girly. I do anyway, at least. I love an A24 film. This is peak A24 fantasy for those who are familiar with those kind of movies. It's family friendly. It's called The Legend of Ochi. And so essentially in this family friendly movie, you've got these mysterious creatures. You can see them there in the trailer. There they go. And that girl right there, she's a young girl who helps to reconnect this Ochi with his family of Ochis, or its family of Ochis. And so it's awesome because, watching this, you might think, whoa, AI, which everyone is assuming people are using more and more these days. But no. They are beating those allegations. It actually took 7 puppeteers, 4 ape suit performers. Like, they pulled out all the strings. So.
It looks like their parent is like Yoda and a gremlin.
Yes.
And it creates an Ochi.
So true.
All right, let's get into streaming right now. This one I started seeing ads for. It's a toile. It's about 2 ballet companies, and I love it's the team that's behind Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, the Gilmore Girls. So I assume a lot of fast-talking, witty characters, things like that.
Exactly, and you're French, A1, love that. So it's 8 episodes. It is streaming now on Amazon, and you can binge watch it because they're all out right now. Essentially, we are diving into the ballet world. You can see those looks right there. We've got French and American dancers who eventually their worlds collide. They have to swap the stage, but also lives. And so it's really an awesome peek into what it's like being a ballet dancer. They even went so far as to making sure they cast real ballet performers.
Cool.
So, yeah, this should be a good one.
I love a New York-centric show. I know there's a lot of New York scenes. I've heard that kind of thing.
Same.
Okay, new reality show, Bravo. This is called Love Hotel, streaming on Peacock. How does it work? What's going on?
It is. I'm snapping my fingers because, the Bravo peeps, we love a Bravo show, and we especially love our housewives. And in this one, essentially, you've got the housewives who are, it's kind of like a mix of Housewives meets Love Island. They're going to this island. The ones that are single, there's Ashley Darby there, and they're being set up with eligible bachelors to see if they are, meant to be. So that one is not bingeable, I should say. Episodes drop every Sunday. So the other 2 on streaming, you can binge. This, you gotta wait.
None of the housewives are wives anymore anyway, so we might as well find them some love, right?
That part.
There we go. All right, let's wrap up with a little music. Coco Jones, who many people know from Bel Air, speaking of Peacock. First album.
First debut album, though she's been in the music game for years now. You're familiar with her probably from Disney and, you mentioned Bel Air, but this is her first album and she's been so excited about it, posting about it on social media. It is called, there it is, Why Not More? Question mark. And so this is, someone who is saying, listen, I am ready to pull out all the stops. And that's what she's doing. You're getting 13 songs and it's available on all streaming platforms.
Love it. Cool. Kay Agram, thank you so much. Happy watching, happy listening.
Let's get it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now, though.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.